What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Eat, Train, Prosper. This is episode 134, and we are touching on cardio for physique athletes and speaking a little bit about how we like to structure our rest days as well. Brian is back from his trip in Bermuda, which I'm sure we will hear a little bit about. As always, Brian, can you please kick us off with some updates?
Of course. Yeah. Glad to be back, I guess. Bermuda was awesome. That is actually the first update on my updates. So the trip was amazing. I mean, it was everything that I would have wanted it to be for, the period of time that it was, coming off the bike race and being pretty depleted overall. In retrospect, I think we're actually going to touch on this in the episode with the cardio for physique athletes, but in retrospect, I think I was a bit more depleted than I probably realized at the time. We all have this ability to kind of use adrenaline and goal setting or visualization to push us through periods of time where maybe things aren't quite as optimal, and you can convince yourself that you're good. And then you don't realize that you're not good until you come out of it. And so I kind of correlate it to what I hear is like for people in contest prep. I mean, I've been deep into a diet before, but I've never really gone to, 4% body fat or something like that. But it's the same thing where they convince themselves that it's all good, this is normal. And then they start eating food again and they're like, oh, that wasn't normal. And so I've felt a bit of that coming back from the bike race and then Bermuda. Bermuda took place, I think it was about exactly a week after the bike race. And so during that week, I was still kind of in this mindset of, I don't want to lose my cardio gains. I've worked so hard for them. So I kind of kept doing the cardio. I ran and did intervals one day. I biked a couple times. I rode once or twice and, kept lifting and stuff. So anyways, a little bit of a tangent there, but Bermuda was a great kind of reset for me. I guess the first thing I should say is that Bermuda's insane. I'd never been to the island before, but at least where we were in Tuckerstown. And there's a Hootie song. There's a Hootie and the Blowfish song called Tuckerstown. And I used to love it when I was younger. Never knew that it was about Bermuda until we went there and we stayed in Tuckerstown, which is really cool little rock peninsula, if you want to call it that. It's like an elevated rock that like grew out of the ocean essentially. And they built a bunch of really expensive houses and a community golf course, country clubs and all that stuff on this really thin strip of elevated rock. And there's one point on this road that basically runs along the top of this rock. And you can stand there and look to the right and it's the ocean, and look to the left and it's the bay. And there's just water around you everywhere. And then right in front of you is Ross Perot's house, which is like a $100 million palatial mansion right on the very end of this cliff with incredible views of everything. And so anyway, that was where they were staying. And this house was amazing. It was like, I think it's somewhere like a $30 to $40 million house, mostly based on location. Not that the house wasn't nice, because it's a 6-bedroom mansion as well. But staying there with all my friends was such a great experience. And we sort of had two separate trips. We had 6 guys there for the first trip, or for the first 3 days. And then 2 of the guys left, and we had 4 guys for the remaining 2 days. And so the first 3 days, we did a lot of drinking and we made the trip much more of like a bro fest partying type thing. And then the 2 guys left, and the second half of the trip was much more relaxing, low key. Had a lot of hanging out at the water and going for walks and stuff like that, cooking at home mostly. And so it was a really cool sequence. I've never done a trip like that before, where I've kind of had 2 trips in one trip. And I would say that if I were to do something like this again, that's exactly how I would want to have it play out. A couple days of fun and partying and, not prioritizing health and recovery as much. And then on the back end of the trip, having the prioritization of the health and recovery, so that you kind of leave the trip feeling like you actually recovered a little bit from it. So that was great. I ate a ton of food and obviously drank a lot of alcohol. Ended up gaining 6 pounds on the scale, which I I wouldn't think correlated to 6 pounds, except that I came back from Bermuda and just kept eating. And so I did officially gain 6 pounds. The last few days, the scale's been right at 190 for me, 190, 191 type thing. So seems like I'm back to where my body is best. I really do function best in the low 190s. I can always feel when I get into the high 190s, low 200s, that I start to feel a little bit sluggish and lethargic. And then when I get into the, low to mid 180s, I start to feel a little bit of the diet effects, so to speak. And so low 190s is really a great place for me. And I feel fantastic overall. Food is coming in, protein's coming in, lots of calories, and a lot less cardio. So since getting back from Bermuda, Boulder decided to have a snowstorm the other day. We got like 8 or 9 inches of snow 2 days ago. Temperatures dropped to the low 20s as a high for a few days. And it made me kind of realize that winter's coming, and every winter I just move less and eat more. And here I am. So that is the situation at the moment. I just started, I guess I'll jump into my last update here. I just started Hell Week on the rower with my new coach. And so he got that into the True Coach app for me a few days prior, and I was able to review it. Basically, it consists of a series of tests from about 15 seconds long, which is 100 meters as fast as you can go. And then there's a 30-second test, a 60-second test, a 3-minute test, a 2K row test, which I just did yesterday, a 5K row test, and then a series of these breathing exhale things that are supposed to test your kind of, I don't know, lung capacity or something. It's called a Bolt test, but I need to kind of look into it and read about it a little bit more. It's actually interesting, though, if anyone wants to try, you take a massive inhale through your nose. And then when you feel like you can't inhale anymore, you begin a really slow exhale through your nose. And the idea is to time how long you can exhale through your nose without stopping, swallowing, having to breathe, holding your breath, anything like that. You kind of have to constantly be slowly exhaling through your nose the entire time. And apparently he didn't put this into the program, but apparently an average or decent score on that, an expected score is 40 seconds. And so the first time I did it, I got 39 seconds and I was like, fuck, this sucks. I'm awful. I need to do this again. And I tried it again and I got 39 seconds again. And then he has me doing this every day right when I wake up. And so this morning I did it again and I got 47 seconds. So we're already seeing a really cool improvement on this breathing test from 2 days. And then the best update of all is that I PR'd my 2K row from even 2 months ago. So 2 months ago, I was in the middle of the depths of my biking. I would say my cardio was about as good as it's been. And I went and did the 2K row test just because I wanted to see what I could get the day the rower arrived. And I did it in 7:23. Yesterday, I did it in 7:14. And that is 1 second off of my all-time best 2K row, which was from 2011 when we were trying to qualify for a local CrossFit competition called the NLI back in the San Diego, LA area. So being 1 second off of that is really cool. It hurt really bad. The 2K row test is no joke, but I'm really, really amped at that score overall. And looking forward to, the remainder of Hell Week and kind of getting going with the cardio programming from there. The weight training sessions have been amazing. I think that's just a product of more food coming in and doing less cardio. So even though yesterday was a 2K row test, it's like I literally worked out for 8 minutes on cardio yesterday. So it's way different than 60 to 120 minute bike rides when you just go and you focus and you go hard for 8 minutes. The recovery piece just seems, to be a non-issue compared to the longer bike rides. So anyway, those are my updates. Everything's going well, feeling great. Training's going well. And yeah, let's hear what's going on in Straker's world.
I have 2 very, very fun, exciting updates today that I'm very excited to share. The first one is I have released my first resistance training program, hypertrophy program on the Train Heroic app. You will be able to find it by my name or Straker Nutrition Company or by the name of the program, which is called No Man's Land. It is a what I call like intermediate plus to advanced high intensity program. There's not a large amount of volume. I wouldn't necessarily call it like super low volume, but the intensity definitely outpaces everything else. Male focused, there is going to be, adequate amounts of chest volume and those sorts of things, not a large amount of glute volume. I know we have a large female listenership. Do not worry, I will release a women-specific program, which I've already been asked about. It's just not the very first, right? So I've been working on this for literally months, and then as you guys have probably picked up on in stereotypical Aaron fashion, it's been done like 4 different times, and I'm back in there tweaking things. Okay. And then I just needed to do a lot of like marketing stuff for it. So like, we filmed stuff for it, which I posted on my Instagram today. Got a graphic designer to help me do different parts of it. So I'm a perfectionist, I would say, and it's something that's been effectively 20 years in the making. I wanted to make sure that all aspects of it I was happy with the presentation for that.
Awesome. Well, let's learn a little bit about it. So how many days a week are we training?
5 days per week.
Okay. What's the split?
So I actually have to look it up now, because I've actually, what's really funny is I have a very high like client onboarding week. So I've built like 3 programs this week on top of it. So I'll have to fire it up, because I would not remember off the top of my head. So what we have is a quads and calves on day 1, pull and erectors on day 2, a push abs on session 3, hams and glutes on the 4th session, and then a mixed upper volume on the 5th and final day.
Cool. That's similar to kind of how you were training either most recently or right before that, where you kind of had that mixed
earlier
upper day.
Yeah. I do really, cool. And I've done that with a lot of like my client programs too, is like, okay, what's a decent structure that we want? And then if we're open to training 5 days per week, or if people are kind of like me and I'm like, what else do you do at that 5th day? If I don't have any other hobbies or anything, I might as well go train. If recovery capacity is adequate, I'm like, okay, let's put in like, the upper day is always a fun one. It might be a little bit less kind of, it depends on the person, right? We might push more arms and delt volume if that's kind of a priority, or if it's like, hey, we just want, if the goal is just kind of an overall physique size sort of thing, I'll push just more like chest and back volume in that.
So yeah, you can kind of use that last upper body day as a specialization piece or an additional focus piece on a muscle group that needs some extra attention.
Exactly. Cool. I really like that approach.
I'm going to assume, and I could be wrong, that you're probably training pretty close to failure on most stuff from the get-go, maybe after like an intro week.
The intro week doesn't have any of the like intensity techniques. It's on load selection, discovering which weights that we're going to be, progressing through, making sure that your machine settings are correct and those sorts of things. And just it's a little bit lower volume. The intensity is still close in proximity to failure, but we don't have any like rest pause sets or anything like that. And then those start to layer in week 2.
Is there separation between the intensity or proximity to failure of something like an RDL or hack squat versus something like a lateral raise or bicep curl?
Yeah. So some of those I will have very specific instructions on everything, but yeah, like your lateral delt, medial delt, like we'll pretty much take into failure right away, because there's, from my standpoint, not really convincing evidence to not do that. The recovery capacity is quite high, but then assuming that the people that will be signing up for it are not coming from training like I'm training right now, I want to be not just to rip people's faces off from day 1 sort of thing, because that's not fun for anybody.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, 100%. How nuanced are you getting with things like elbow position and pull line for back work and lat work?
What do you mean by that? Is it like when I'm asking about
like, are you separating it out? But well, yeah. So like, with the position of the elbows in relation to the torso, you sort of have those 3 angles where the elbows are in tight is usually more lats, elbows are all the way out would be a little more upper back, and then elbows somewhere in the middle being a little bit more rear delt / hybrid of everything, like full back slasher type thing. Like, is that is that something within the programming across, various movements and different muscle groups, or is it more kind of like, hey, wide grip pull down, narrow grip pull down, like stuff like that?
I will say like, hey, we're like, for example, I know we have like a wide pull down in it, and I'm like, okay, we're doing like a wide grip pull down, and I'll say like, this is for the upper back. We want the elbows coming, not in tighter to the body. Like the emphasis on this is the upper back. So I will have that distinction in the kind of, I forget what they call it, like exercise description notes. Like I would say like what I tend to do with my programs is I will say, this is the exercise. This is the intent of its inclusion in the program. And this is like the desired stimulus of the musculature that we are targeting with it.
Sweet. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to spend too much more time. I was just curious on some of the basics, implementation, what the program looks like, the split, of course, as everybody always wants to know. The split. Always wants to know the split. There was a post from Paul Carter, who I still kind of creep on sometimes on Instagram, but he posted one the other day that was like, here's the order of the best splits. And it was like full body, push pull legs, upper lower, bro split. And then number one was any of the above. And it's just kind of like, it made sense. Like it was a great post because like he's right. I mean, any of them can work depending on, what your needs are. And so it's kind of funny that people are always so focused on the split because it really just doesn't move the needle a whole ton.
Yeah, I feel like, and I could say I'm like a recovering split snob, sort of. Like 2 years ago, if you asked me, I'd be like, dude, the bro split's fucking dumb, and like here I am now, more or less running things quite similar. Like there's an arm day, once every 12 days, but it's in there. I think like when you have a program that you're bought into, like you being bought into it is the primary, and you just, committing to it and trying really hard. I think different ones have different, relative importances based on other facets of your life and those sort of things. But yeah, I definitely find myself, that's something I've opened my stance up on a lot more. Like it's just like we've talked about on the podcast. It's just your distribution of exercises and volume pretty much.
Yep. Cool. That's all I got on that one. You got another update. Yeah.
I do have another update. It's a big one. I've been sitting on this one for literally months. We're opening a gym. Jackson, myself.
Yeah, buddy.
There's going to be at least one more, potentially another partner opening a gym here in Bali. It is a hypertrophy, bodybuilding focused gym. It's going to be really, really awesome. It's the big thing for 2024, the biggest project of my life for sure. We've broken ground. That's moving along. It's hopefully open, like full open will be in about a year. So November of next year. And you might be thinking like, why the hell does it take so long? You have to build everything from scratch here. So it is literally erecting a building from nothing. So those things take some time. So I'm very, very excited about that. Yeah, it's going to be a massive undertaking of work and in coordination of things. If you're potentially wondering what my role is, I am the equipment guy. So I am sourcing what we will be putting in the gym, pretty much have executive control there to what I would like to do. Obviously relative to like budget and those sorts of things, which has been a very, very big eye-opening process of contacting different manufacturers and different things like that. It really is like the Wild West on pricing and certain things. So sometimes there's welcome revelations of like, oh, wow, this is wonderful. Let's do this. And then there's other times where you're like, oh, wow. Oh, my God. Really? What? That's insane. No, we're not going to do that. That's the sort of thing. So it's been fun. And it's a project that I feel like I've kind of been preparing for 20 years. Same thing with my training program, right? 20 years in the making. Like I've spent at least 5 hours per week in gyms every single week for the last 20 years of my life. So I do feel
a lot of hours.
It's a lot of hours, right? So I'm very, very excited. I'm excited for the opportunity. Yeah. And it's just, we're all really pumped about it.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. I obviously had heard about this a couple months ago from you and had to keep it close to the vest here. But really cool that we're able to kind of put it out in the public and kind of tell people about it at this point. So I saw a cool little reel or video or whatever that Jackson put on his page a week or two ago, kind of going over the release of the fact that, hey, there's going to be this gym called Undefeated, and how the computer was obviously computer graphically generated with the images from the video. It looked like it was all purple and blackish,
blue and
as the
black,
colors and stuff like that.
It's like
blue and black. So how is that, like, how did you guys come up with that CGI or whatever it is of that breakdown of what the gym is going to look like with, obviously no building yet?
Oh, that's all the architects.
Like, what was it? Got it. Yeah. So but the equipment piece, you're assuming you're going to have this piece and that piece and this piece, but obviously you don't have the actual equipment yet.
Yeah. So the architects, what they did was, because at that point in the design, like the equipment selection, it was really like the 3D modelings and stuff were just to really give me the idea of like, okay, in the 3D model, all of the equipment is to scale, but it was really for me just to be like, okay, this is how much space we have. This is how many like pieces that I need to plan for, sort of thing. And then what eventually I'll do is, once I start getting like I'd say I'm probably like 75% of what I know we're going to do, I'll fire up like a 3D model from some software and actually start placing things to make sure. We're probably going to end up with like, well, the hard thing is, and the real reason, all the gyms here, because we're on this like small island in Indonesia and things are getting shipped from the United States primarily, the one primary gym here, Body Factory, has all Watson kit out of the UK. They basically strike deals with this manufacturer. Like, hey, we'll purchase your entire kit for our gym. What kind of deal and that sort of thing. So we have like a Watson gym here. Unfortunately, it's a lot of like V1 Watson stuff. And they have, to give Watson some credit, they have made some pretty good revisions on particular pieces. But like the V1s, a lot of them are god fucking awful. We have another gym here that's primarily Arsenal kit. That one's pretty decent. Another one is primarily Panada, which it's all brand new Panada, which I'm going to be honest, I don't fucking care for. Some of the older stuff is a lot better in my opinion. But pretty much, I've talked a lot of shit about the gym decisions and things made here. So now I get to put my money in my work where my mouth is, and I'm hand selecting a lot of pieces, and we're sourcing from different countries and that sort of thing. And we're not going to strike a deal with outfitting everything with one manufacturer, because there's always some designs are better than others, and no one hits a home run on every single piece of equipment. So
that was literally going to be one of my questions, was, are you going to kind of source from all these different manufacturers? So like, it's kind of like what Cass did at N1, where he has a lot of prime equipment in there, but there's also a decent amount of Atlantis as well. So he basically was like, I'm going to choose the best piece for the job, not trying to, just give prime everything. Because in some cases, Atlantis did a better job of constructing like the Transformer Hack Squad or the glute press or whatever it is. So yeah, that's really cool, man. Super excited for you guys. I assume you're going to take all of the equipment and then paint it the colors of the gym, like so it looks like that blue black that was in the demo video.
All the equipment will be black. We should be able to get that from the different manufacturers, like a straight black. I would imagine we'll end up with a couple of used pieces as well that I'm working on sourcing, and then I don't know. We might like there's a powder coating place. We might come in, get completely taken apart and powder coated and that sort of thing. Or if we're like itching just to get training on it, which is probably going to be the actual case, we might just bring it in, as long as it's not like bright fucking red or something like that. But
yeah, cool. That's awesome, man. Very happy for you guys. Really cool that you have, over the course of this podcast, you have gone from being a nutrition coach to having your hands in like 4 or 5 different pots. And so it's been really cool to watch that evolution.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been exciting, very, very stressful, a lot. But in having big conversations, like one thing when Jackson approached me early on and said, hey, I'm opening this gym. I'd like to offer you to be a part of it. I was excited, but then I was like, oh, well, that changes everything, because now I have to go ask Jenny if I can be selfish and keep us here in Bali for a couple of years now, sort of thing. Right. Because that wasn't our plan. The plan was to move back to the States and set up and that sort of thing. And now it was just, bigger life conversations and stuff, but very grateful for the opportunities And they're just things I need to figure out, right? So I can have my cake and eat it too, which is completely doable, just requires more work on my end.
Yeah, buddy. Very cool. Sweet. Well, let's jump into the main topic for the day, which is this idea of cardio for health and for physique athletes. And so the question came through. I'll just read you the question because I think it was phrased quite well. Could you guys cover programming cardio around hypertrophy work for serious lifters like physique athletes to have a good cardio base for health and insulin sensitivity, etc., and not have it interfere with leg training and training recovery in general? And so I think that's a great summary of kind of what we're going to discuss today. And I don't think we have a ton of scientific evidence to go over in this regard, but we do have a ton of personal experience with both ourselves as well as with clients. And I think it's going to be a great discussion. So do you want to kick it off with any kind of your initial thoughts here?
Like with everything, right? Semantics are important, right? And I think we have to define like serious lifters like physique athletes. So I'm assuming that we mean like people that are going to get on stage in those sorts of things where you have these large considerations.
Or at least, I was going to say at least like if you're not going to be getting on stage, you're doing it for some sort of photo shoot, or you're basically committing to the pursuit of hypertrophy being your number one kind of objective.
Yeah. Okay. That's a much better explanation, right? Because I would consider myself someone who's like, sure, a serious physique athlete, but my stage aspirations are quite small, like quite very, very small.
Yeah. But I would definitely put you in the category of serious physique athlete for sure.
Yeah. I think in order for us to get to this like serious physique athlete, because something that I think happens very, very often in the space is things get kind of like misapplied. My famous, example is like I do personally feel a little bit responsible for this too, in efforts to not have people like trash their bodies and partake in a lot of the negative approaches of body composition and fat loss and that sort of thing. I may have kind of overemphasized some of the risks of things. And then I'll have a client who's in like, week 6 of the calorie deficit. And like, I think I need a refeed. I'm starting to feel pretty fatigued. And I'll be like, we're down like 4 pounds and you're still at body fat percentage, like in the 20s. You know what I mean? Like that's just not happening there, sort of thing. So with these kind of considerations, like you're going to have to be quite lean for these things to really start to be applicable. So I would say sub 15%, for a male. For a female, let's add 8% to that. So about 23%, which is quite lean, for a female. I would say past or higher than those, like just adding the cardio in is going to be a net benefit for health and your insulin sensitivity and these sorts of things, because your body fat levels are still at a point that are, I don't want to say higher than they need to be, but for being a serious physique athlete at 15% body fat, we're still not even really going to see what your physique looks like that much because of the obvious body fat there. So that's kind of like the first consideration. If we're still north of that, I wouldn't really worry about the things like, am I cardioing my legs away until you get lean enough to see if you're actually going to get lean enough or not. So that's kind of the first approach that I wanted to take with this. What are your thoughts there, Brian?
I think I have a couple thoughts. First off is that I think that you can over cardio at any body fat percentage.
That's definitely true.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends how far you take it. And I guess my perspective on this is formed a bit by my experience over the last year. Not that I was above 15% body fat, but it did make me realize that there is a point where you can do so much cardio in the pursuit of health, or I guess in my case, eventually in the pursuit of performance, that it does start to have some mitigating effects. And whether those effects would be as prominent if I was 10% body fat higher, I don't know the answer to that because I wasn't there. So it's possible that you could be right. And it could be like, hey, if you're at 25% body fat as a dude and you want to cardio 7 days a week, like you may not see the deleterious effects that I did at 12 to 15% body fat. So I'm open to that, but I do think that blanketly saying that you can't over cardio if you're over fat, I don't think that's entirely true.
I like that point that you said,
yep.
because I had made some assumptions that I was under the assumption that since we're talking about a serious physique athlete, someone wouldn't be just cardioing 7 days per week, because the primary goal would be the physique, and there would be a better control on nutrition. So I made some overstatements there with my incorrect assumption. So thank you for bringing those up.
Yeah, I guess the other question would be, if you're a serious physique athlete, like how much are you going to let your body fat get carried away anyways? Like, are you going to get up to 25, 30% as a dude in the first place? And so since this then brings me to kind of my second point on what you were discussing, which is this idea of, what's the official term, the PC term, health at any size or something like that. I think that's the term, health at any size.
I believe that is the rough terminology. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you look at that, it actually is true, in the sense that I believe the studies show that if you're qualified as overfat or whatever, obese, whatever the terminology is, that about 30 or 35% of people can still be healthy while being labeled as obese or overfat. And that comes down to like what your blood markers are, your insulin sensitivity, and kind of some of these other things that we're layering into this conversation. By the same token, there appears to be about 30 to 35% of people that are skinny, that are normal body fat levels, that are also unhealthy. And so if we look at that as a split, you have about 66% or 2/3 of people are likely not healthy if they're overfat, and 66% of people likely are healthy if they're not overfat. But that still leaves 33% of overfat people that are healthy and 33% of skinny people that are not healthy. And so it kind of blurs the area, and it makes it difficult to prescribe health based on body fat percentage. We're just kind of using generalities at that point. And so, yeah, I think that's just a very important point, that you can be skinny and have poor insulin sensitivity and poor blood markers, or you can be overfat and have great insulin sensitivity and great blood markers. And so I just think that complicates the conversation a little bit.
It does. And I think because of the semantics, it's important to bring it back to someone that's like a physique focused athlete, right? Because I believe body fat percentage does have some, I guess, gatekeeping, we could say, of that.
Yeah.
Having that like cardio base, I think many of us, and I use the term us because until, let's call it like February, right, of this year, I was firmly in that group. I think can have a little bit of an inflated perception that, oh, I train 5 days per week, like I train hard, that means I'm in acceptable cardiovascular shape. And that may not necessarily be true. And I think that's where many people find themselves, like many lifters find themselves doing no real cardio. And I would say like starting with 1-2 sessions per week. And I would say it's relative to your time availability in your current training split, right? If you have, kind of like we just talked about earlier in the podcast, if you have like a day 5 of training that's just like delts and arms, right? Just drop it on the back end of that. Like that's your first kind of session. And then I would recommend for the other one, just placing it as far away from legs as a very, very simple baseline as you can, because you have the kind of time availability and options in your schedule to just of your training split schedule to place it there. That's a no-brainer. Then you're not even going to have to worry about it. Now, what I think for general, health improvements from a cardiovascular standpoint, that's typically going to be correlative with positive insulin sensitivity, assuming that your diet is pretty decent, which will primarily take care of the majority of the insulin sensitivity there. And I think that's like a good place to start. And then we'll kind of iterate the conversation from there.
Yeah. So I think jumping into the idea of energy balance being a huge key to the puzzle, that's the thing I put as the number one note in kind of cardio plus pursuit of optimized physique. And it's like Aaron is in a deficit right now and Aaron is doing cardio. So it's not to say that you can't be in a deficit and do cardio. However, you're much safer doing cardio and not worrying about having any mitigating effects on your physique if you're at energy balance or in a slight energy surplus. And I alluded to this in the beginning as I was going through my updates about how I had that kind of convincing of myself that everything was okay. And it was blurred and a bit ambiguous because exercise does have a bit of a blunting effect on hunger. Not just lifting. I think both lifting and cardio on their own right have been shown to have appetite regulating effects. Regulating and blunting, certainly different things. But for me, I noticed as I was going through my bike race prep that my energy balance was obviously in a deficit because I was losing weight, and yet I wasn't even hungry because of all the milieu of things going on in my body and all the different energy ins and energy outs that were occurring throughout the process. And so paying attention to whether you are actually in a deficit or not, because cardio can do that to you. And so the combination of kind of cardio plus appetite control, creating the necessary piece to ensure that the cardio isn't having a debilitating effect on the progress. So that was a bit of a meandering statement. Maybe you can speak to this a little bit with your experience with the cardio. Because I know for me, when I just dieted and I didn't do cardio, I was just dieting and doing steps, I was hungry all the time. I felt like I was constantly depleted and really just hungry. Like maybe I had too much time to think about food or what it was. But somehow when it changed from steps to doing more intense cardio, the focus on food completely was eradicated and I didn't feel the hunger at all. And so I thought that was a very interesting dichotomy, that steps plus diet made me really hungry, but cardio without diet, in the sense that I didn't have to have any restriction on the food, the amount of food I was eating, but I was yet I was still in a caloric deficit. It's very tricky. So any thoughts you have on any of that?
Yeah, I think there's a sweet spot of diet. By diet, I mean calorie reduction plus an increase in activity, right? There's a really good sweet spot, right? If you go too low on food, too low on activity, like you're not crossing a bare minimum threshold of food volume. You're going to be hungry all the fucking time. That's like the I'm only pushing the nutrition side and I'm not doing any activity. Then there's the kind of the opposite, which is let's call it more closely to what you were just doing, where your activity levels and expenditure were so high, you'd have to kind of eat like an asshole to offset that, and given that we're talking about, health focused modalities and principles sort of thing, like you're not going to do that. The trade-off for each person is like the time commitment, right? And this is a conversation I have very, very frequently with clients, where like, Aaron, what do you think about like if I add 20 minutes of cardio like twice per week? And I'm like, we can do that, but that's gonna, that might get us like 87 calories, per or whatever. Like, stop having the fucking pizza that's 600 calories. Like it's not worth it. The time investment is massive for a simple trade-off of a weekend choice sort of thing. So I think that threshold is very, very important, but I do think there's a sweet spot on the high end and a sweet spot on the low end. I'm in a very first kind of discovery for me is like I'm dieting on very high amount of calories. Like I'm eating more than I kind of even particularly care to right now, but the training intensity is so high. The activity is so much higher. I'm still able to be in a deficit because of that. And everyone's going to have that kind of sweet spot for them based off of their schedule, how much you historically like to eat, the distribution of your diet, how much of that is volume regulated versus, a higher fat versus higher carb in the scale play with volume there. So it's hard to give like a definitive there, but there is definitely like a scale, and there's some of the metrics that I just covered are going to help you decide whether which side of that scale you are more currently on.
Yeah, no, those are really good points. It also makes me think about the idea of, you mentioned time control and how much time people have in the week. And so what you're doing, like you and I both work in the field. And so I think in some ways, it challenges our ability to prescribe the same approach for people that maybe don't work in the fitness industry. And so I'm thinking of somebody that, works a 9 to 5, 8 to 5 type job, and they have time to make it to the gym for 45 to 75 minutes, 5 or 6 days a week. And that's really it. So now we're faced with this idea of how do we optimize physique and make sure we're getting enough sufficient weight training sessions in, while also fitting enough time in to do cardio and have that benefit to health. And if say you have 6 days a week where you can train, like you can basically train an hour every day except one day where, if say it's a family day or something along those lines, you have something come up that you can't train. How do you split your training so that you're getting the optimal dose of both? And I think at this point, it now kind of decreases the application of steps, because steps are so time consuming. And so we could do an entire podcast on how you can get sneaky steps in, where, you go to the grocery store and you walk around a lot, or you park as far as possible, or maybe you bike to work one day, or, other ways where you can kind of multitask and you can get some movement in without it being called a workout. But for a normal person, they may not even have that opportunity. And so now it's like, you have 6 days, you have an hour each day. How do I optimize this under these constraints? And you're probably left with something along the lines of, hey, you have 4 days of physique training and you have 2 days of cardio. And that's, the best we can do given that situation. If that person can't create the time to get 10,000, 15,000 steps in during the day, maybe they can be convinced to add a 15 or 20 minute cardio session onto the back of some of their upper body days, which you referenced. And I know this is how you used to actually go about your cardio. Now you're doing it kind of in the mornings as separate days. You're kind of doing it in a bunch of different places, right? But initially you were just kind of tacking it onto the end of workouts. Am I right with that?
Yeah. And I mean, that's still when I'm training by myself, like this week, I'm adding like 15 minutes of walking on the end of training, not fucking leg days, but just to help, increase some. And I'll be honest, my steps are abysmal with how Bali is and stuff. Like I'm averaging in the 4,000s for my steps, it's quite low, to be completely honest. Based off of what you were talking about with it all comes down to, time and availability. And I agree. Like I don't have, the only clients that I have that are doing like 15,000 steps per day are like the clients who have like dogs who are walking them like 3 times per day, and they're already naturally much higher in steps. And that's a very low hanging fruit for us. But I would say as my client age kind of grows older, as I apparently appear very mature to people for whatever kind of fucking reason, I've been like, okay, and I'm honest. I'm like, okay, we can get things done of 2 different ways. We're getting something done with our time, or we're getting something done with our money, right? And if someone's like, Aaron, I'm 45, I'm established in my career, like let's throw some money at it. I'm like, sick. We're gonna buy a spin bike and we're gonna put it in the garage, right? And when you get up in the mornings, 3 days per week, we're gonna go hit that spin bike for 25 minutes, and you're gonna watch Sports Center that you normally do in the mornings anyway. And that's like what we're going to do. So that's one thing that I've been incorporating much more recently, especially as clients want to diet through the winter months and stuff. Like dieting through the holidays is challenging as it is, coupled with it's freezing in most of North America and people aren't really getting outside. You have to get a little bit more creative. And that's one that I've been using as a very, very low hanging fruit. And based off of like the context of the question is, we can get our heart rate up higher than we would if we're just out in steps, and then flex a little bit more of that, health improvement, cardiovascular improvement benefit there.
Yeah, no, really, really good point on trying to just fit it in where you can and just kind of getting movement in. So that was one of my next points as well in the outline, was this idea of just creating more movement throughout the day. Because when you look at the science and the studies about health outcomes with exercise, it is significantly more beneficial for you to move multiple times throughout the day for short durations than it is to move a lot of distance or time one time a day. And to even separate that down even further, I believe I heard about a study that compared one large bolus of exercise in the morning to one large bolus of exercise in the evening. And the evening one actually had much less benefit to cardiovascular health and insulin sensitivity than the one in the morning, as just a way to set your day up. And I think probably has some interaction with circadian rhythm and how, when you wake up in the past, the day is light and you need to have that high cortisol release in the morning. Exercise helps kind of promote that cortisol release, sets up your cortisol patterning throughout the day so that it can start high and decrease gradually, essentially sending you to sleep when you're supposed to go to sleep. Versus exercising at night kind of gets you into that reverse cortisol pattern where your cortisol is lower in the mornings, you ramp up in the evenings, and then you can't drop the cortisol in time to sleep properly at night. And then when we talk about insulin sensitivity, which seems to be, one of the things that this question asker was really focusing on, is quality sleep is the number one thing that really is going to positively impact your insulin sensitivity. And studies have been done showing that a poor night of sleep upregulates your glucose response by like 10 or 20 points compared to having a good night of sleep. So you could be somebody that, has an AM cortisol of 80 on a good day where you sleep well, and it could be above 100 on a day where you have a poor night of sleep. And so if your cortisol patterning is all dysregulated because you worked out at night, then now you have that kind of problem of getting quality sleep. And it's this snowball effect of sorts. And so this kind of leads into that thing that I started with, which was movement throughout the day. And we've heard Eric Trexler talk a lot about exercise snacks. I've heard this on a couple other podcasts as well by some researchers. And so the idea being that every hour or every 2 hours, you get up from your desk and you sprint the stairs for 1 minute or something along those lines. And then you come back down and you sit down for another 59 minutes. And you do this on repeat sort of throughout the day. And the positive impact on insulin sensitivity and cardiovascular health is so prominent with that type of approach that it really makes me feel that if you're a time restricted physique athlete and you don't have 30 to 60 minutes to sit on a bike or a rower or go for jogs or whatever it is, that you can embrace exercise snacks and get a total of 5 or 6 minutes of exercise throughout the day that's really high intensity and end up with a similar overall benefit. So any thoughts or anything you have on that?
That study that you just quoted, what type of population was that on? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard it a number of different times from experts on a few different podcasts. So you're right. I mean, it may be on a more sedentary population. And it actually, dude, just not to go off on a completely other tangent, but you just got me thinking that exercise actually, shit. Now I lost my train of thought.
So what I wanted to do is kind of steer us back to the initial question and kind of provide some kind of general recommendations there. The one thing that's important to understand is if you're someone who's like, let's say like Brian and I, right? We are very, very heavily in the training side of thing, the lifting, the cardio has been very, very new. Your cardio is going to suck in the beginning, right? Your legs are going to be burning trying to keep your heart rate at like 130 on an exercise bike or something like that. And it is going to have an acute, impact to your maybe leg training if it's within like a 24-hour period or something like that. That's acute. You will adapt rather quickly to the point now where like, I'm in a calorie deficit. I've been in a calorie deficit for 15 weeks straight. I've lost a considerable amount of body fat. I'm getting quite lean. I pushed my cardio quite hard today. I train legs tomorrow, and I know that my legs will be very, very adequately recovered, and I will have no problems putting together a very, very good training session. It may not be like that. It's unlikely going to be like that in week one, but your body will adapt as you provide it, those stimuli to adapt to. That being said, there is a point of doing too much. In the, if you're just doing like the Stairmaster on level 100 and you're like sprinting or something like that, or if you're running, doing a cardio modality that has an eccentric loading to it, that will be more fatiguing, especially like in the day prior to training legs or something. Keep data on it, right? If you were like, hey, before I was doing my cardio at all, I got 15 reps on the leg extension, at 100 pounds, and 10 reps on the hack squat at 400 pounds. And now like at week 2 into my cardio, I've regressed, or something like that, keeping calories at an isocaloric level, body weight at an isocaloric level. Like, you have very real, objective data to help you decide or not. But I would say initially, like, set it up further away, because most cardio modalities, almost all, are going to be lower body based. So you can obviously put it further away from your lower body to give you the best kind of chance at being recovered there. And just start, and then you don't need to necessarily scale your cardio up unless you are trying to get, quite lean, I would say. And let's call it sub 12 or even less. Like, I'm a firm believer that you can do so much of the work with nutrition. It depends where on that scale that I talked about earlier in the episode that you want to fall. If you want to be a little bit more, flexible dieting, that sort of thing, you're going to have to do a little bit more cardio, because your calories aren't going to be nearly as accurate as you think they're going to be on a consistent level. If you want to run a tighter ship on the nutrition side of things, you'll be more consistent there. Then you can then leverage less of the, ramping of cardio. To two very viable approaches to get you to the same goal relative to where you are personality wise and which approach you think fits you best.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great practical application for it. I was reminded of the thing that I forgot earlier, which was, you mentioned populations and what population was it studied on. And so if it was sedentary population, which it probably was, I would have to go back and find that. But we have to remember that lifting itself provides you so many insulin sensitivity benefits over the general population that, to Aaron's point, the benefits of exercise snacks or of cardio in general is slightly decreased just by the fact that you're already a lifter, and thus you have a lot of muscle, you have a glycogen, glucose tank, essentially, where, excess glucose can be stored. But kind of on the heels of that, there does seem to be something about the idea of muscle contraction in general, just a small muscle contraction being an ability to create a glucose sink. And the study I'm thinking of, and I hate that I keep referencing studies without citations, but I just hear shit and it goes in my brain, and I don't remember the authors. So there was one where they had people after a meal just sitting at their desk at work doing seated calf raises with no weight. So they're literally just doing a calf raise under their desk and contracting their calf at the top. And it was something like 1 or 2 minutes of that post meal had a drastic increase on the glucose response and insulin response post meal. And so I thought that was really interesting. And if you can get movement post meal, any kind of movement, whether it's contracting your calf or going for a 5 or 10 minute brisk walk or walking up some stairs or doing biceps. I mean, it could be anything. And that seems to have a significant impact on overall glucose disposal and health markers. So lifting is certainly the number one thing. Like that's the thing for a physique athlete that's going to move the needle on health more than anything, because you have muscle and you have that sink for that glucose to dispose of. Anything you do on top of that, like movement after meals or structured cardio a couple days a week or anything like that, all of that are going to be less beneficial than the main thing you're doing, which is just lifting weights and eating a mostly high quality diet for the most part. And so I think it's really important to remember that. And the more movement that you can fit in that is non-fatiguing and concentric based, as Aaron mentioned, which I think is important. So concentric based activity being rowing, biking, those would be the main two, I think. I mean, you probably can get it a bit with elliptical, I guess, it's all going to be better than running, where you have the impact and you have the eccentric loading. And so keeping that in mind too, if you're a physique athlete and you're trying to optimize your physique, cardio choice is certainly important, like Aaron mentioned. And then the last thing that I'll mention on this topic before we move on quickly is just that your main focus, if you're a physique athlete, needs to be on the hypertrophy training. So your volume, the amount of output that you have in yourself, in your stores, in your reserves, the amount of energy you have, the amount of mental focus you have, these things all need to go to your hypertrophy training, not to the cardio. And this is the contrast to the way that I went about it as I was preparing for the bike race, where the bike race and the cardio became the number one priority for me, and the hypertrophy was put on the back burner. That is not what I would recommend to anybody pursuing optimal physique or hypertrophy. That has to be your main focus, and the cardio is the secondary focus. And the healthier of a diet you can eat and the better quality foods you can put in to your body, the less you're going to need to pull the lever of cardio to optimize your health outcomes.
Very, very well put. I don't think I have anything else that I could add to on the back of that one.
Cool. Yeah, so I think that makes sense. We'll roll from there into the next question. And this question asker, if we didn't cover it fully, if you have any other additional follow-ups, shoot me a DM and we'll take it from there. The next topic was one we've been trying to get to for about 3 weeks. We knew it would be a relatively short topic, and we kept trying to tack it on to the end of episodes and just kept rambling on so long that we never got to it. So the question was on rest days, essentially how we spend our rest days and why rest days are important. Without putting the question asker on the spot, it felt to me like the person was sort of looking for some encouraging words as to what are the benefits of rest days? Like, why should I prioritize rest days versus just how do we spend them? Like, out of curiosity, it seemed like they wanted some reassurance that, hey, this is why we take rest days and this is why they're important. And so she asked us about that, but also about active versus passive rest days. And then on the heels of that, kind of how we personally spend our rest days.
Yeah, if I remember when you sent me this, I believe the question asker had a little bit more context of like, I really don't like taking my rest days or something along the lines of that. And I'm wondering like if I need to. And it leads me to a story, right, from many years ago, which is actually funny. 2012, 2013. I remember one time, Brian, we had been training on Sundays with, I can't even remember his name now. Some guy in the gym, Dave something, who would like come in on Sundays because he had this like crazy work schedule. And we were like training on a 7th day of the week. And then after like 2 weeks of this, you caught wind of it and you asked me, you're like, hey, are you guys training on Sundays too? And I remember being like proud, be like, yeah, fuck yeah, we are, dude. And you were like, no, you cannot do that and train every single day. And I'm 25, at this point. And it was like the complete opposite reaction. I was expecting like a high five, like, Aaron, you're so committed. And you were like, no, you're a fucking moron. And I'm like, oh, damn it. and I just didn't know, like, in an acute period, that's fine, but you're just digging the hole a little bit deeper. And then eventually you're going to be standing at the bottom of the hole, realizing like your head's not above, ground anymore. And things are just getting worse. If that's the kind of the way that I wanted to start this one. And I would say, if you're finding yourself at a point where you're itching on your rest days to go train, like your training days may not just be hard enough. So you can just try training harder. That therefore you'll get more out of your training session, and you will put your body more into a state where you need that recovery. So that's kind of when I hear that from people. Let's look at our training a little bit more. Like, where does your proximity to failure look like? How is your training, designed? And typically there's a lot of optimization we can make so that they're not really itching on, whatever day to go in and do things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I tend to be somebody that really struggles to just take a sedentary rest day. And I don't know that I would go as far as to say that my rest days are active rest days per se, but on days where I'm not lifting or having structured cardio work, very, very rarely throughout the year will you find me just sitting on my ass doing nothing. Usually on those days where I am not lifting or having structured cardio, I will walk a lot. I will just move because I'm programmed to do that. And on days where I don't move, and which does happen, I would say 2 to 4 days a year, I'm usually pretty crushed from my training sessions, to Aaron's point. And I'm like, I just don't want to move today at all. And so I honor that and I don't move. But usually my brain and my body are better off with some movement. And that literally, in my case, is usually just walking. And so on days where I'm not lifting, which occupies 90 minutes of my time usually, instead, what I'll do is I'll go on 5 20-minute walks throughout the day. So I'll sit down at my computer, I'll work for 80 or 90 minutes, and then I'll go walk for 20. And I'll literally do that on repeat for 8 or 10 hours. Every hour or two, I'll just do a 20-minute walk, and then I return to my computer and I work some more. And I find that that really breaks up my work time. It makes me more effective at working. It allows me to have some personal growth and enjoyment, whether it's, listening to a podcast or something along those lines. I'm getting outside, I'm getting fresh air. I'm just changing up what would be just sedentary time sitting there. And overall, I'm significantly better off for it. And so that's that gray area of active rest day versus passive rest day. I wouldn't go as far as to say that walking 20 minutes multiple times a day would be considered an active rest day. Other people may disagree with me. But I do find that extremely beneficial. And aside from those 2 to 4 days a year where I do just feel crushed and just don't want to go for walks, I honor that on those days. But on the days that I don't feel as crushed, I do tend to want to do those walks. And so maybe separating this into buckets of like, hey, do I really want to do this? Or do I feel forced to do this because I feel like I'm supposed to move or something along those lines?
What you said at the end there, I think is the key, is what is the intent? And very similarly to you, Brian, I have discovered that now my non-lifting days are my cardio days, right? And I actually was just comparing this when I submitted my check-in this week. I've been averaging over like the past couple months 4 training days per week and then 3 of those cardio days. Like that's actually been the average. I feel so much better when I start my non-training days with that cardio. I'm at there 7:30 in the morning. I get my heart rate up. I get sweaty. I go in the sauna for a little bit or the hot bath. I'm back home by like 10, starting my work day. And like, that's what I did today. Right. And now I've been here at this desk. Obviously, I've gone into the kitchen to eat and stuff since, 10 a.m. It's now 9 p.m. I feel so much better on my non-training days when I do this. When I don't, I find that like, I don't leave the house, right? And you get that kind of cabin fever. I haven't fucking done anything all day. My work suffers, my mood suffers. I prefer it so much more. So much so that I've realized I don't like having a day where I do absolutely nothing. I don't like it. I like the day. Some people love that day where you're just like sitting on the couch watching movies and stuff. I fucking hate that day. I feel like I wasted that day.
Same.
And everyone's a little bit different, right? And I'm not trying to make anyone feel any way, but it all comes back to how you feel, right? And when I have those days, I don't feel good about how I spent that day. And I've just found that I feel so much better. I try and do something every day. And if that's a day where, let's say I'm not going to go do cardio, whatever, I want to go, to the beach for sunset or something like that. And we're going to do a big walk. But what I like to use with the rest day is like, even when we're not lifting, we are still recovering from something. In a wonderful, tie-in with the cardio conversation we had, I do not feel that cardio session is necessarily impeding my recovery of, the pull day I did the day before or something like that. Also, with the program design, I'm not training that pull muscles again for like another 5 days. So it's obviously very conducive for ample time to recover in and of itself. But I think in tandem with how things are structured in your programming, it's really how you feel about how you personally feel and how you identify with the rest day,
Yeah.
whether that's active or maybe sitting on the couch and like watching the Netflix series all Sunday. Like the people talk about things that like charge them, and they have like those reset days, and they feel really charged up for like Monday when they have that like super down tempo Sunday. I 100% respect that. I just know for me, that fucking buries me. I hate those days. I feel terrible after them, so I don't take them. But just identifying where you are, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I don't love the days where I don't move either, as I was just discussing. I think it's really important for this question asker and really anybody else to remember that muscles grow outside of the gym. And you don't want to be doing things that are constantly stressing your body out and putting you into a sympathetic state, because then your autonomic nervous system is elevated and you're just not going to be in an optimal state to grow. And assuming that that's the goal, because, we're in a hypertrophy world here, when you move on your rest days, you should move in a way that doesn't create additional stress. And so going for walks at, 90 RPM or 90 beats per minute of heart rate or whatever it is for you, a decent walk pace, that is going to be somewhat cathartic and really help you probably facilitate recovery through increased blood flow and glucose sensitivity and stuff like that. Whereas sitting on the couch could actually have the opposite effect, where your body kind of starts to stiffen up. Your legs are super sore. They end up even more sore because you didn't move. You get up from the couch and you're like hunched over and you're like, I can't walk, but then you actually go out for a walk and you're like, oh, I kind of feel way better after this. And so there's a number of factors involved there. I remember in CrossFit days when we would have rest days, I would often organize a mobility circuit. And so I don't really do much mobility anymore because I just don't find it necessary for hypertrophy training, which, we've discussed in prior episodes on here. But if you're somebody that's doing a bit more type of training that's a little bit more dynamic, where maybe you do need to have some mobility work in there, rest days are a great opportunity for you to create a 30 to 60 minute circuit where maybe you go 2 minutes of stretching on 4 different areas. So it takes 8 minutes of time. And then you go row for 4 minutes at a casual pace, or you go walk around the block or something. And then you come back and you repeat the circuit 4 or 5 times or whatever that is. And so there's a number of different ways that you can implement these more parasympathetic recovery modalities into your training that still allow you to move. So you're not being completely sedentary, but you're not doing anything to cause that sort of autonomic stress that's going to have mitigating effects on your results overall in the gym. So probably something important to keep in mind there.
Yeah. And to add on to some of the other additional parts of the question, my eating changes ever so slightly. The only thing I don't have on my non-training days is my intra-workout carbohydrate, right? Everything else stays pretty much the same. And the big reason there is to create a very, very consistent effort from day to day so that we can very, seamlessly read my averages and stuff. Now, if you're someone who maybe if you're in like fat loss and things are a little bit stickier than you would like and those sorts of things, those are opportunities to reduce some carbohydrate and stuff on those days. However, it's important to understand that, let's say Monday's Monday's a pull day, Tuesday's a rest day, Wednesday's a leg day. If you're purposefully pulling your carbohydrate down on Tuesday and then training with legs Wednesday morning, you may be, inadvertently impacting the quality of that leg session in doing so. So you just want to, things are not always very, very cut and dry and straightforward. They may be a little bit nuanced in your given situation. The other thing I think is worthwhile is covering, because it is something that plays a massive part in my recovery right now, is sauna and hot bath. I have those in on all of my, my training and non-training days. That's been a very, very big improvement in recovery. The ironic thing there is they are not parasympathetic. They are quite sympathetic. The sauna is fucking god awful, if I'm being honest. But I have noticed massively increased recovery. I have also started putting the hot tub. It's quite hot, like skin burning hot. Post training leg days, not getting sore anymore, which is crazy, absolutely crazy. So I do think there's some warranted experimentation on yourself there and seeing if you notice things. What I will say, and from more of the research that I've kind of looked into as I've kind of become a little bit interested in it, the hot bath and the sauna need to be hot enough to where they cause discomfort, right? There's this really kind of silly statement of no discomfort, no expansion, right? So nothing that isn't discomforting is going to basically cause you to improve. They do need to be hot enough to where you don't want to be in them per se.
Yeah. No, good points. The idea of the hot tub and the sauna being sympathetic is actually very interesting because it's sympathetic in the moment, but it's parasympathetic overall in that it's the coming down from the sympathetic that has that almost reverse effect where you end up more recovered as a result of it. And so that's a very good point and very interesting. I do need to bounce. So the last thing that I'm going to wrap up on here is my diet on rest days. And so when I lift, I almost always lift at 8 a.m. or 8:30 after I drop the kids off at school. And I have a whey and Gatorade shake with Element in there, which we've gone over a number of times on here and laughed at how much of a chalky mess that drink seems to appear. But I love it. And so on days that I lift, I have that whey and Gatorade shake as I train, kind of intro workout. And then on days that I don't lift, I just don't have it. And that really is the main difference. I usually end up fasting in the morning until 10 or 11 a.m. So it's not like I'm doing a really long, 24 fast or 16-8 or any, yeah, it probably is more like 16-8, but I'm not doing like an 18-6 or something like that. I'll wait a few hours to eat in the morning, basically to the point where I would usually eat after my whey shake. And then I'll just have my normal lunch meal at that point. It may be slightly bigger because I didn't have the 300 calorie whey protein thing in the morning. I'll usually have a bigger lunch and then I'll usually have a bigger snack in the afternoon as well, just to make sure I'm getting enough protein because that whey shake gets me 55 grams of protein. So I need to kind of account for that throughout the remainder of the day. But that would be really the only big change I make is no whey Gatorade shake and just kind of bigger protein boluses throughout the remainder of the day.
Cool. So cool. There you guys have it. Brian and I's approach to active versus passive rest days. I believe we covered everything pretty good on that first question on implementing cardio. Obviously, some quality asides we went off and in tangents as well. But as always, guys, thank you for listening. Next week, Brian, I believe we will be doing our monthly Q&A. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. November Q&A.
Wonderful. Next week, November Q&A, and Brian and I will see you there or talk to you there. Not so much see you.